All right. Hello, SIG Release friends. Today is Monday, January 13th. This is a SIG Release meeting. It will be recorded and available on the internet. So please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct and overall just be awesome people. I mentioned before we started recording, we've got a packed agenda. But if anyone is interested in adding more things to the agenda, feel free and we'll see how many things we can get through. First up, new meeting times. We've been going back and forth about the meeting times and initially selected Monday because that was the most popular, but it seems a few people did not get a chance to fill out the doodle when we submitted that, when we shared that last year. So I'll be sending one out this week to decide on a new meeting time. And that will be, we'll keep the same time, but we'll basically, it'll still be a bi-weekly meeting, and the same time slot will alternate between the SIG release meeting and the release engineering meeting, right? So you're in the SIG release meeting right now, and if you were here next week, it'd be the release engineering meeting. So stay tuned for that. I will send that out on all of the mailing lists as well as Slack. Cool. Any questions? Sweet. All right, moving on. The next one is grooming. We've got a bunch of issues open and we should groom them. 118 is, we're in the midst of 118. So we want to make sure we get a jump on all of that stuff. So we'll be working on, so one, if you're assigned to an issue, take a moment to think about it, think about whether or not you can work on it in 118. Potentially reassign it if you're part of a previous release team and no longer think you're able to work on that stuff. Feel free to ping us and we'll get it assigned to someone else. Yeah, so over the next 2 weeks, we'll see a flurry of assign and priority important soon and yada, yada, yada for the 118 cycle. Feel free to do some of that yourself if you're already assigned to things, or if there are interesting issues that you've noticed that you'd like to pick up, just ping us on the issues too. Cool. All right. The next one is the Contributor Experience Survey. So Contributor Experience does a yearly survey, and that is open right now. I'm not sure exactly when it closes, but often what falls out of the survey is some opportunities to improve the tooling around the community, and some of that is our responsibility. So if you have opinions on how we do what we do every year, please take a moment to fill out that survey. Cool. All right. The next one is kubeadm out of tree. So SIG cluster lifecycle has submitted a KEP that is marked as implementable, or the PR has a KEP set as implementable right now. That KEP is going to require quite a bit of interaction with SIG release. So I want the release engineering subproject to be aware of that KEP. There are things that are talked about like Debian RPM package production and tagging and branching of releases and timing of who goes first. Was it the K-release repo getting tagged, or is it Kubernetes, or is it the kubeadm repo? So a lot of things will be happening around that, and I think that what I want to do is make sure that we prioritize those tasks so that they can be successful for 118. So please, I'm asking for as many eyes as possible on that KEP. Tim and I are assigned to it already, and we'll be doing a sweep. But if we can get some advanced eyes on that, that would be super helpful, because y'all have some valuable context to what's happening there, especially if there are some of you who are crossing over and doing duties between SIG release and SIG cluster lifecycle. Sound good? Cool. Any questions? All right, speeding along. So talking about building debs and RPMs, I've been working on QPKG, which is partially a refactor of our of what was the deb builder, or whatever we were calling it, random Go script within the K release repo that built our debs before. So that's a little cleaner now. It's a Cobra-based CLI utility, and it does exactly what the title of the agenda item says. It builds, well, it builds debs right now. It doesn't build RPMs. So the idea, so I linked the initial PRs as well as the README for QPKG. The README is kind of a quick README, which is just the output of the usage from the command line utility, as well as some of the known issues. So two of the known issues is that the way we do validation for the packages, channels, and architectures within the tool is a little broken now. So if you submit multiple command line options for, say, like packages, it will interpret those options as a string with a comma, with multiple commas in it, as opposed to a string separated, a comma separated, which gets interpreted as which should get interpreted as a string array. So I know about that one. It's listed in the known issues, as well as the fact that we can only build RPM specs right now. I need some time to sit down and spin up a VM that has or a VM or a Docker container or container image, excuse me, that has the capability to do all the Debbie stuff, do all the RPME stuff. And once I have some time to do that, I'll start tweaking the RPM side. You'll notice that the old scripts in the repo are gone. So the build.sh for RPMs and anything that was in basically /build is gone in K release, and all of that stuff has been moved into CMD / QPKG, right? So that includes, well, most of that stuff has been moved. That includes the Docker files have been moved to the top level of the repo, and the cloud build as well. So basically, the reason for that is that we have to figure out versioning and branching for the repo first, so that it supports. We may want to have a separate Go mod submodule for QPKG, so that people can basically build within that folder, right? So right now it's in the top level so that it can take advantage of copying in the Go mod and Go sum from the top level and all the extra bits that are required. We can get into how the directory should be designed a little later. Probably we'll try to move those things in later, but I want to make sure that at least we have a place where the image is actually building. So the images for QPKG are live in Kate's staging release test, the container registry. So the names of the images are QPKG and QPKG-RPM. That I want to complete this cycle. I think we're close-ish, famous last words. But I gave a demo of QPKG during the release engineering meeting last week. So if you're interested in seeing that, I won't go over it again here. You can just take a look at the recording. Any questions? I know Dims may have questions.
And not yet, Steven.
But yeah, so that's going to be something that the QBADM side is going to want to use. So the idea that I have in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially, so when we ran the deb building script, we essentially would run it from start to finish, and the output would be debs, right? It's been refactored a little bit so that there is a separate step to build the specs, right? So the idea being that you can build the Sorry, I think someone is unmuted.
It looks like it's Heba. They've muted now.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so the idea being by having a separate step, what we have been doing for time immemorial is essentially running these things, maybe tweaking the specs before we actually create the packages, and then never committing those specs to the repo. Right. So I'd like that to change. And so essentially, there is a separate templating step. If you run QPKG and one of the subcommands debs or RPMs with the spec only flag, um, it'll allow you to output the current specs for debs or RPMs. The idea would be then a release manager would commit those to the repo. We'll figure out how we want to structure that, whether it be like specs slash latest, our 117 dot blah, right? So the idea being that you would be able to go back to the repo and understand exactly which specs we used to build the packages that end up getting published to the apt and yum repositories on the Google side, right? Another piece of that is that we'll be building this tool, but we'll also be trying to get a better understanding of how Rapture works. Rapture is a tool that Google uses to take the packages that we build and then publish them to the apt and yum repos. So we need to understand the inputs and outputs for that. I have an action item to write up an issue about exactly what we need from Rapture. So hopefully I can drop that in this week. So any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, all right. By the way, it appears we might not have a note taker. If anyone is interested in doing notes, probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. You'll get the prestigious honor of being listed on our agenda as a note taker. Okay. Okay, next one up. Patch releases tomorrow. So Tim and I are going to be handling the patch releases for 117.1, 116.5, and 115.8. The issues are linked in the agenda. Essentially, we wanted to make sure that we were personally responsible for these, as we know from the last patch release cycle, there were issues with being able to get, so basically a bunch of CI jobs broke because of this weird thing with the regex, and our builds happening out of order. So Tim and I want to be available to directly address that as the builds are running. I'm going to be doing some poking at Anago today and seeing if I can figure out exactly why the builds are running out of order. But we have some fixes in our back pocket that we'll need to execute on fairly quickly. So we just want to be available for that. So Tim, I was thinking something, and I meant to DM you, but it was also Sunday. So a comment from Lubomir got me thinking that maybe we should cut another 114 release. He mentioned that there are a few KubeADM tests that use 114, basically SKU tests for KubeADM, and they're broken right now. And they're broken as a result of the fun tagging issue. So once we fix the tagging issue, it's like, I would prefer them to not be broken for the entire cycle, but I can also understand if we don't want to cut another release just for that. I don't think it's critical to the project, but not necessarily the community consuming releases. So
I want to read through that and ping Lubomir if I can catch him. He's 10 hours off of me, so it's practically end of business for him, but I know he sometimes has unusual hours in his local time zone, but I want to get a hold of him and try and get a little bit more detail on that and describe what you and I had discussed last week about hopefully having the new artifacts that we build tomorrow be good, and understand what he feels would still be missing with those. And yeah, if there is a gap, it would make sense to build another 114 to address that if we're able to build the others in a successful way tomorrow.
Yes. So I can already tell you that it looks like we're not going to be. I ran a mock stage and release of 115 over the weekend just to see what would happen. And it looks like it's still building out of order. So if we can figure out the logic in time for tomorrow, then.
But our brainstormed workaround was that the commit that's causing the problem shouldn't be there at all.
Right. So at least to start, what I'm going to do is add just like a quick debug in Anago that says like it'll be like a git diff of the tags or something like that in a git show, at least so we know what's happening at that point, because it's still tagging out of order.
But if we don't make the commit, the tagging out of order or in order would both give the same output.
Right, but it will. Yes, they may be tagged on the same commit and have no.
They should be. They definitely
should
would be tagged
yeah.
on the same commit. Yeah.
So what we're talking about for the people who aren't aware is basically there is. So when we do an official release, so that's like a patch release or so .0 through foo, right? Two things happen. Two releases happen, right? The first one is the official release, and the second one is a staging of the next beta for that branch, right? So if we cut 117.1, it's also doing a 117.2 beta 0. Right. Basically to prep, our stuff for the next cycle. I'm not sure that we should continue doing that, but also Anago is this monstrous mess that we're learning more and more about every day.
The other thing that we talked about was due to the patch that Jordan made and that's been cherry picked back into the branches, that commit is irrelevant.
Right.
I thought. So being the weekend, I hadn't gone in and analyzed that, but that was on my to-do list for the first thing today. Is that not the case?
So we need to make sure that. So he set the version field to unversioned in that commit for the Open API spec. We need to make sure that whatever scripts are running in KK that update the Open API spec are not pulling it from some source that we don't know about. Right, because if that is still bumping it to some version of Kubernetes, then we'll still have the problem.
Depending on how they do the regex and swizzle of the template, but we should just simply remove that commit making code at this point, because it's irrelevant.
For sure.
And at that point, the tags would both be on the same commit, and we shouldn't have what had been the problem previously.
Right. Yep. So we're going to work on that today. The second piece of that is the jobs were failing because ultimately the getcube.sh script is looking for a certain version of Kubernetes, whether in our GCS buckets, whether it be in the CI bucket or the release bucket, and the version because it tagged out of order. The version that was pushed was essentially a commit ahead, which when part of our logic is doing a git describe, and if it is a commit ahead, the regex that we use does not work because it's tagged as x.y.z dash commits ahead dash commit-ish, right? So it'd be like 117.1 dash 12 dash G and some SHA, right? And that doesn't match the regex that we use to determine where build artifacts are located. So in addition to removing the Open API spec bump logic, we also need to mess around with the regex that determines where CI and release artifacts are located. We had done a kind of hotfixy thing after the last patch releases to get the systems moving again, where I manually tagged each of the release branches, so 117, 116, 115, to the next beta. So they were tagged beta.1, which basically becomes our CI recognizes that as a new build tag and kicks off a new build. From there, the new build has a correct version string that matches the regex and allows people to use getcube.sh again. So we need to edit those as well. Tim, what I was mentioning about 114 is that the SKU tests are comparing 114, 115, right? So if we determine that like we've fixed all this stuff, then we would need to backport this stuff to the 114 branch before cutting another release to fix those jobs. I also, geez.
And that would be because we built 114 with the problem in December for its final build.
Right. Right. So I also have a PR that is becoming kind of hairy that I would love review on. I'm popping it in the chat. Tim, can you grab this and drop this in the notes as well? There you go. So essentially what this PR is doing is it's removing the 114 jobs. So we have to determine if we fix this. We have to determine if we merge this PR. The PR is also going to be it's going to be a conflict magnet. Right? There are a few job generation things, and it's a little messy. It's messy because of the way we do the version markers in Kubernetes. So the not the latest stable x.y markers, but the Kate's dev beta stable 1, 2, 3 markers. Those markers basically slide every release cycle and at different times. So when we cut a beta, when we cut a branch, new release branch, so when we cut the 118 release branch, it will slide. So 118 will become beta, stable 1 will become 117, stable 2 will become 116, and stable 3 will be 115. So part of what I'm trying to do in this PR is detangle the logic between when we delete the last supported branches jobs and when we create jobs for the new branch, right? So some of that work is done, but it exposed a few things like in the way that the GCE, GKE jobs are configured, and the way that the node kubelet jobs are configured. It exposed some old SIG node jobs that I removed, some old kind jobs that were removed, added the new kind jobs since I was already there. So the PR has been, it's gotten kind of chunky. So I want to make sure that it gets merged soonish. But also now that the potentially cutting another 114 release is in play, then it may have to wait. So stay tuned. And if you have any comments on and you don't understand anything that I said, we can talk about how some of these jobs work. We've also for those jobs, a lot of the tools that we use on the branch management side were written by Catherine during our great test infra role destruction of 114 or 115. So those jobs have recently, those tools have recently been moved to rel-eng repo, rel-eng directory within the test infra repo, right? So if you want to take a look at what those tools do, linking it here. So what I've done is add an owner's file for that, so that release can actually more actively take an interest in cleaning up those jobs, since it looks like we are primarily the only ones who use them. There's also a PR in flight around the updating the generated jobs, and the generated jobs and the generator has a bug in it where it strips the environment flags for certain jobs. So I'm looking into that one as well. Let me just link this. I know I know I'm going all over the place now, but here you go. Okay, Tim's typing. Hold on. I'll link it in the Zoom chat in the meantime. Okay. So yeah, this cycle will be making some changes. What I hope to do is work on removing the, starting the conversation around removing, or continuing the conversation around removing the generic version markers. But before we can do that, one, we need to make sure that jobs that are manually configured do not use those generic version markers. So if you've ever seen the fork per generic suffix annotation or something on a test infra job, set to true, that's what will, when the job is forked, that's what will produce a job, job foo dash beta or job foo dash stable one or something, right, with that generic suffix. So instead we want jobs that are targeted to the branches that they are testing against. So job foo dash 117, job foo dash so on and so forth, right? That is the easy part. The harder part is refactoring rel-eng test underscore config.yaml, which is the YAML that gets slurped up to do the job configuration, the configuration of the generated jobs for test infra. Right. I've also added us in that PR. I've also added us as owners to those jobs, since we own the tool, and we should also own the output for the tool. So that'll be shared between release engineering and Catherine, who wrote all the tools. Any questions? I know I was rambling a bit. All right, cool, super. So the next one is creating the CI signal subproject. So I've been thinking about this for a little bit, and it seems that Jorge has also been thinking about this a little bit. So we've been chatting back and forth about the idea of creating a CI signal subproject, right? And essentially what this is to maintain this body of expertise that we build up over the release cycle. So a lot of think about what we did on the release engineering side, right? We pulled the branch, we pulled the patch release manager off the release team and and created a team around patch release, and then also did the same for branch management. So we want to do the same for CI signal. The idea would be CI signal remains as there will still be a CI signal liaison, or whatever we call this thing. Basically, the person who is the team lead right now for 118, as well as their shadows. And the subproject would be composed of a bunch of really clever people who have bent CI signal to their will over the past few release cycles. So several of the CI signal role leads for the release, as well as people who are interested in getting involved. So if you have interest in getting involved, let me know. I have to put together a quick proposal for that, defining what the team is doing, making sure that we talk about shifting the activities of the team from, or of the sub-project from not just from reactive to proactive. There's a lot of, we found a failing test. This test is failing. Okay, let's go fix the test, or let's go contact the owners to fix the test. A lot of the work that we've been poking at around what I just talked about, updating the release jobs, making sure branch generation is working, starting to look at doing knocking down flakes. I know Maria did a lot of work on attacking flakes for the past few cycles, as well as Jorge and Aaron. So if that sounds interesting to people, let me know, and I will let you know when we start spinning that up. Cool. Questions, comments, concerns?
Unlike, go ahead, Taylor.
No, I was just saying I dig it. I'm in accord, but I'm not a Honda.
Right. I kind of feel like unlike patch release, I don't feel like this team is going to replace the release team role, because theoretically what the release team role does is very different, which is the release lead says, are we ready to release? And CI Signal is one of those roles that says, nope, stuff's still broken.
Right. So yeah, so the idea would be where the CI Signal team within the release team currently focuses on what's in master blocking, informing, and 118 blocking and informing. The CI Signal team would be focused on all blocking, all informing, and the way those jobs are generated, how those things are handled, who has owners, who doesn't, where the flakes are, building dashboards around that stuff. And Josh, I would want you to be a part of that, obviously.
Yeah, I figured. The do we already have a lead candidate for that team? Because we have a lot of good people on CI Signal.
My first thought was Jorge, but he is leaving the release. So I think it would make sense to build a set of sub-project owners that would be composed of the previous CI Signal role leads for the release team. Maybe the past 4 or something would make sense. Plus you, plus Aaron if he's interested and is able to dedicate time. But it's going to be a lot of the obvious suspects. So. And anyone who has been on a past CI Signal team and is interested in doing that or works on that day to day for their job, let me know. Okay. All right. So the last one. So last call. Seriously, last call for agenda items. If anyone has anything else, I know I've been talking most of the time. So the last one we're looking at is the last one that's on the agenda at least is discussing what the K release repo and repo tagging and branching policies should be. There's a lot of good content there already. Love the write-ups that Lubomir and Hannes and Tim have dropped in there. I'm thinking that initially we can start light. Maybe we don't need to do tagging. Maybe we don't need to do branching rather immediately. And I think that's echoing what Hannes said. Just to get tagging in place, as we're starting to build more and more Go tools, it might make sense to have multiple tag types that reference the tools. So Kubernetes -blah, Krell -blah, and QPKG -blah, right? As well as a top level tag for the repo, right? So we've been going along the 0.2. I think 0.2. I think we're at 0.2.1 right now, and Yeah, I don't know. There are still things to figure out. It'd be nice to um, figure them out this cycle. I think we need to support the KubeADM out of tree stuff. There are also things to figure out around how can we do branching in a generic manner. Is this something that is already functioning in test infra? Is it something that we can borrow some art from the publishing bot? Can we actually just use the publishing bot for this? So there are a few questions there, and will be a deeper write-up once I actually get a chance to review the KubeADM KEP. So any questions about that? Cool.
One of the things that we discussed here was the code we have today. It's kind of your classic forklift of a monolithic process into the cloud. We do a cloud build, but really we have a giant set of bash that runs sequentially in a VM. Meh, not super interesting. We'd like this to eventually be evolved towards more of a cloud native pipeline, something that akin to what people talk about as GitOps, kind of going back to earlier in the meeting when Stephen mentioned having a build that comes from a spec that's not on a machine, but is in Git. If we have each of these tools pipelined together, maybe they each run in a container, each of those containers is versioned independently, that's where you start to realize that you have a potential problem with tagging and support, because depending on how forked this stuff becomes in terms of enhancements and trailing support, if we are trying to rebuild one more release 114 this week, for example, we may not dare to do that with the tooling that we're building right now for 118. We might want to use the 114 branches equivalent of tooling so that there's continuity for that stream of building and the tooling used for the building. So you could maybe imagine a YAML file that specifies I'm using these 5 tools at these 5 different versions, but that needs to be reflected in the repo, and somehow that forking and variation of the code happens. So this probably ends up as branches. Maybe we have a master, maybe we have a branch per tool and a branch per release, and some interesting merging of content between those, and tagging obviously as well.
Yeah, so because we haven't figured out that part, I think that I think that continuing to tag is a good first step. So when Tim and I were talking, what I described as kind of having this, promotion-y process, right, where we have essentially the way we tag those artifacts, or the way that we start staging those artifacts, is based on SIG release, K releases go, right? So we say K release is tagged for 117.2 or 118.0. Okay, it goes into a job, it does a magic thing, and the job says, okay, all the artifacts that all the artifacts that are in this repo at this tag have successfully been able to stage and mock release Kubernetes, right? Once it's validated there, then we actually shoot it into the staging and the staging and release part of the release, right? Those the artifacts that we produce from that, the tarballs, the actual binaries, if we prove that we can produce those successfully, then it would go to another step where it would build the debs and RPMs, right? And if we can prove we can do those successfully, then we sign them, then we publish them somewhere, right? So we want to eventually build something where we're taking, each. I think this is something that Hannes had alluded to earlier last year when he did the demo with Concourse, about like there should be a pipeline where there's clear entry and exit criteria for each of these steps, which we kind of conflate a bunch of the steps that are happening today based on the tool that we're using. So this impresses the importance of refactoring Anago this year. It's going to be a massive undertaking, but I think that we have learned a lot of good lessons from starting to refactor things like changelog and fast forward and push build and so on and so forth. So I think we'll be successful at it. We just need to understand what's the best way to jump into Inago, because enough of it is intertwined that as we're doing this, we kind of have to do it all at once. If anyone's interested in looking at some of what could happen, there is, let me find this PR. I have a prototype branch, prototype like feature branch on K release that tweaks some of the settings in Inago, or tweaks some of the variables in Inago. That is dropping that in the notes. And the idea is to use that for the new Kate's staging release test GCP project. So that's us moving away from Google Infra and onto Kate's Infra. But obviously there are a lot of things happening at the same time. So it's moving away from that infra, but also building a system that can run in either infra, and then refactoring the tool that runs on that system. And then it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. Take a look at that and let me know if that makes sense. And all right, questions, comments, concerns? All right, cool. So the next one, Tim, over to you. I have some ideas, but go for it.
The call for maintainers track content for KubeCon EU has come out as of late last week. We typically do an intro and a deep dive session. We have a tentative plan for the deep dive. Sasha was interested in doing a talk, and the early drafting that we had done last fall, I think it was in late November or early December, is linked there in a Google Doc. We typically, for the intro, do an overview of what a release is, what SIG release is, what the release team's part in that is, what the cycle looks like. We don't have to do that. It's something we've done a bunch of. There's lots of videos out there. It's not like this isn't discoverable, so we could also mix it up a bit and do something different there. But we have 7 days at this point to submit our content. And if anybody's interested, especially if we have new folks on the call who've been around SIG release just a bit this last year, and if you feel like you have something interesting that you've noticed or wondered about, you think other people wonder about, and you want to share that out with the community, this would be a great opportunity for you to get up and speak and share information with the community.
So 2 ideas I had. One was to shift the release engineer. So to do the Sasha's talk as the intro, right? And combine that with what is a release, right? But walk through, do it from the context of the tooling and not necessarily the people. Like you said, I think we've done a lot of. I think we do a lot to promote the release team in general, and I would like to shine some light on some stuff that we've got going that may be on the release engineering side, but also for the deep dive, maybe doing overview on the CI Signal team that we're spinning up, the CI Signal sub-project that we're spinning up. But that's just me throwing out ideas. I think
we even have enough sub-teams that for the deep dive, we could actually do 2 sub-teams with 20 minutes each.
The only challenge there would be, do we have the right people at the conference? I think we get 2 speakers we can put on this, and they would receive entrance, but they'd also have to be traveling to the conference.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, a lot of us
this
have
new team spins up.
A lot of us have passes for other reasons, so I'm less worried about the passes than about people just being there.
So you're planning on going. I'm planning. I presume from the way you said that. Steven's planning on going. It
I'll be
sounds
there.
like I'll
Yep.
be there as well. Are there
I'll
any
be there.
others on the call who'd be interested in doing something like that for the deep dive? Who will be there?
I will be there. If
All
I can
right.
help.
I'll be there as
So,
well.
so instead of doing this, if you're going to be there, just drop a note on the agenda items so we don't lose who's going to be there. All right.
I think that seems like a viable way to do it.
Yay, we've got a plan.
I wasn't looking for a detailed doodle or anything, just like, do we have critical mass? That could work.
Yeah. Because I know a few people said they weren't attending EU, but I will definitely be there. And I think we have some critical mass in this SIG overall, based on the people I've talked to already. So yeah, if you're going and you're potentially interested in this, just drop a note on the agenda. And this goes for anybody listening to the call afterwards. Please also, if you're interested, drop a note on the agenda. Okay. All right. Well, this is surprising. I think this is the most agenda items we've had in a while, and we still got 13 minutes left. So, is there anyone who has stuff they want to talk about? How's your day? How's your weekend?
So just following up on the prior topic, I will follow up in Slack on that and see if we can get people together, start a Google Doc, draft an abstract for the deep dive, put some names next to it, and then Stephen or I or Caleb can enter the actual submission into the tool by the 20th.
Yep. Please do not submit anything via the tool. Please allow the SIG chairs to do it. I feel like I don't need to say that, but I'm saying that for the sake of the recording. Yeah. Cool. All right. Do we have anything from previous SIG release meetings or release engineering meetings that we want to talk about? Okay. All right. Well, this is going to be a busy cycle, y'all, between KubeCon on our heels, as well as the KubeADM out of tree stuff and all of the release engineering work going on. So if there are things that you want to do to help out, please let me know. If there are things that you see, notice that we will be kicking things out of the milestone and saying like this is not critical for this release cycle and so on and so forth. So just be aware of that. Please, if you are SIG release team, release engineering, CI signal licensing, sub-projects, be sure that you're watching your issues. We really need you to be incredibly attentive to the issues and PRs that you have open this cycle, because it's going to take all of us to be super successful there. Right? So just be aware of that. Thank you, as always, for all the awesome work that y'all do every cycle. Totally crush it. I'm so happy to be a chair of the SIG. And I will see you in 10 minutes for the SIG release, the release team meeting. All right, take it easy, y'all.
Adios.